his papacy as well.
That is true, and I think that's in line of what John Paul II did, because for him the Virgin Mary was also a very important factor.
Celia Mendoza, in New York, you were actually there for the conclave. I'm curious your thoughts, again, things that you saw perhaps during the selection process or once he was announced that perhaps maybe signified a little bit more about who this man is.
Yes, he's a very humble guy. During the congressional meetings, he always walked to the Aula Polo Sexto, which is the area where they were meeting. He was always a person that was willing to talk to the media, to those that knew him. But one of the things that I think is very telling of him is decline the luxury of the Vatican, not riding with the Vatican car after being elected, riding with the priest, also trying to go and pay his bill in the hotel. That's kind of like a little things that he's done. But one of the biggest things that I think he has done after becoming Pope is announcing that he's going on Thursday. The Holy Week starts next week, and during the Thursday Mass, he's not going to do it at the St. Peter's church. He's actually going to go to a jail, a juvenile jail outside of Rome, about 2 hours or so, where he's going to meet with children that are incarcerated. And remember, during the Mass, he's going to wash their feet and kiss their feet, as Jesus did. So that's something that tells you what is his purpose, what he's establishing. And of course, he obviously is reaching out also to Benedict XVI. We know that he probably is meeting him tomorrow, and one of the things that he spoke today actually in the Vatican is about the efforts that Benedict did to reach out to other religions, and him personally trying to reach out to the Islamic community.
Celia Mendoza, one of the things that we know for sure about Pope Francis is that he was the first pope that was selected outside of Europe. Now, do you think that that was perhaps just a coincidence, or maybe some explicit recognition of the large number of Roman Catholics in Latin America?
I believe that it is not a coincidence. I think the church and the cardinals that were part of the conclave saw on him a person that is has roots in Europe, which his parents are Italian, but understands Latin America. Is an area where you have poverty and you have a lot of Catholics. So it's something that he has worked through the years. He has led different organizations and groups of priests to try to reach out to the community who is poor, but also with a strong faith. And that's very important, especially in a church which has lost a lot of followers in Europe and has a struggle in other areas of the world. So I think that is very telling of what the church wanted, and of course of all the congressional meetings that took a long time trying to establish what the church wants now that we are starting a new era.
Celia Mendoza with VOA's Latin American service in New York. Also here, Jerome Socolovsky, VOA's Faith and Religion correspondent, and Dr. Helen Mardaga, assistant professor of New Testament at Catholic University. Jerome, to you, what do you think of the many things should be on the top of this Pope's to-do list?
Well, first as religion correspondent, I have to correct you. He's the first Pope from outside of Europe in 1,300 years. That back then there were popes from elsewhere in the Mediterranean region. I think the first thing he really has to do is prove that he is as charismatic, as good a marketer of Catholicism as John Paul II was, in a sense that he has to be John Paul III as much as he is Francis or Francis I. He has to build that up. A lot of Catholics are expecting him to do that, and also for the non-Catholic world. He has to come across as someone who cares about the issues that they care about.
I want to move on to what some of those specific challenges may be, but Dr. Mardaga, your thoughts as to what this Pope needs to do, put first and second perhaps, on his to-do list.
It's an interesting question that we are asked to tell what the Pope should do. It's a little bit like asking to read tea leaves. But perhaps, you know, we should look at what he has already done. Something very important has happened with his dialogue with the delegation from the Eastern churches. It has been since 1054 that there has been an encounter between the Supreme head of the church in the West and the East. So that is a very important thing that has already been done. So I think that was the first item on his agenda, that that's a point also by calling the Supreme of the Eastern Churches my dear brother Andrew, who is the brother of Peter in the Bible. So that is already something that has been done. So that was the first point on his agenda.
And I'd like to turn to that in just a moment. But first, now we know that Jorge Bergoglio, he's an Argentine, he's the son of immigrants, Italian immigrants. He's also said to be a big fan of the tango. So just how Latin is, or American, is Francis' papacy likely to be? Well, we put that question to Chester Gillis, Dean of the Jesuit-run Georgetown College here in Washington, D.C.
As much as he's in Latin America and in Buenos Aires, he knows Rome, and he's on lots of the congregations. He's fluent in Italian. He's there a lot. He knows the players, and they know who he is. So he's not some unknown quantity, which people might think.
He expects Francis will be a pope in the mold of his predecessors.
Theologically conservative, doctrinally conservative, no question. I don't see any changes there.
But his election is a recognition by a historically European church that its future is where most of the world's 1.2 billion Catholics are, in the southern hemisphere.
Jerome Socolovsky, your thoughts, we just heard an excerpt from a package you put together there. One of the things that comes out is that this Pope, it seems everybody seems to agree, will be doctrinally conservative. What does that mean? How will that express itself?
Well, he'll follow in the mold of John Paul II and Benedict and not change some of the core elements of the doctrine. There's a lot of talk, and I myself did reports about women's ordination, about views on gays, on contraception. It's, it would take a miracle really for the views on that to really change. But it is out there. Catholics and liberal Catholics are thinking about those questions.
Celia Mendoza, how important is it for Roman Catholics in Latin America that their new Pope is, in effect, one of them, comes from where they come from?
It's very important. One of the things that we encountered during the time of the pre-conclave, it was Latinos talking about somebody that will be able to talk to them in their language, but not just in their language, but also coming from the same type of culture, understanding. As you mentioned throughout the program, he's a very jovial person, and he has a way to him of getting close to people, and I think that's very important for a community that really understands that type of culture of being jovial at the same time of being serious. One of the things that I think is important for them is that now they are hoping for him to come to Latin America to visit more often, and that's one of the things that they were expecting from Benedict XVI, and they didn't get to see him as often. So that's another expectation, is have him come by, go to their churches, go to their communities, and actually get to talk to him directly, which it seems to be no problem for him.
Right. I want to move on to some of those specific challenges, but something you just said there, Celia, and I'm curious, Dr. Helen Mardaga, she referred to the Pope as both, I think, humorous and serious, or jovial and serious was the words that she used. Do you see that in this Pope, in Francis?
I sincerely do see that he has another personality. A little bit he comes across as being more laid back, which apparently, Benedict was slightly different. But if I may, I would like to comment on what you just said, and I've heard the word a couple of times. So far, I on a regularly basis, and even here, we speak of the opposition between a conservative Pope as opposed to, I think what you mean, a more liberal Pope. So what I would want to say to that is it's important to make a distinction between conservative, I think you mean, is traditional. The task of the Pope is to be traditional and to respect the Petrine ministry initiated or started by Peter. Now, as you already commented on, the idea is that, or the speculations are that Francis is going to be again a conservative, or said better, a traditional Pope, because he walks in the line of John Paul II and Benedict. Now, there is one particularly striking thing that has been done by Benedict. I think he could not have been more liberal than by saying that he's